Nick Iuppa from the Iuppa Creative Group, and I'm here to talk about instructional design for game design. This is the second part of a two-part presentation. Hopefully you've taken a look at the first part. This talk is going to focus on the contents of 6 chapters from the book End-to-End Game Development, which Terry Borst and I have written together. Let's just do a quick review of the concepts we presented in the first part of this presentation. Let's look at the 4 steps you need to follow before you begin the creative design of a game. You can see these include needs analysis, task analysis, the actual instructional design process itself, and the design and development of a scoring and reporting system. I mentioned in our previous video that we combined several of these steps together. So we had a combined needs and task analysis and the design of an instructional and measurement system. Here's just an example of a task analysis. We mentioned you have to write down all the tasks that have to be performed to do the job. This is part of one of the 44 pages of that firefighter safety task analysis. And notice, if you look a little closely, you'll see that the tasks provide a perfect list of items that can be used in designing the game. So these are the things that you want to put into your game to make sure that your learners acquire the skills you're trying to teach. Now, we mentioned instructional strategies. They're selected based on the kinds of learning problems you find, and here's just a list of some of them. Shaping. This is moving from a very simplified version of an activity to a very complex version until the final version has all the noise of the real world. So for example, in something like a firefight, you start with a very, very simple fire. Maybe it's located in the garage, the rest of the house isn't involved, there are no people in the house who are threatened. And then you move from that very simple design to, a fire at night that's affecting the whole house. All the different floors are involved. There's victims hiding in the rooms. So you can see how you move from that very simple example to the more complex one in a series of levels that get more and more interesting and, bring the knowledge home as you go along. Fading is to provide support for the performance and then gradually take it away. Sometimes this is called scaffolding. One good example is coaching. You provide a coach who gives you advice in the early parts of the simulation, for example, and then you remove that coach as you go along until at the very end you're doing a simulation of, say, a real firefight, and the coach advisor is no longer present and the learner has to make all the decisions on their own. Chaining. This is a very tricky little technique. It's the way you do it is you start with the last step in the process and teach that, then you do the last 2 steps, then the last 3 steps. The classic example is teaching people how to tie their shoes. You just show them tying the very final knot, and then you show the last process where they loop the shoelaces around each other and then tie a knot. An example I like is Lara Croft, the game Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. If you want to play the game for fun, you start at the beginning, you run down the tunnel, you dodge the arrows that are flying at you. However, if you want to train people how to be Lara Croft, start at the very end of the game where the prize is in sight. You go in, you get the prize, and that's it. Then you go to the step before where you have to do that final activity that gets you to the prize. And then you back off little by little. And every time you play that, you're repeating the final steps of the game. May not be as interesting a game, but it'll do a better job of teaching you how to rescue that prize. Competition has to do with similar items that look the same and may be confusing, and the trick is to present them together. So for example, if you're designing a medical diagnostic game, you present 2 tumors, for example, one is malignant and one is benign, and you point out the comparisons between the 2. It's a very good diagnostic exercise. Induction is probably everybody's favorite game playing technique. In it, you don't teach people how to play the game. You put them in the middle of the game and you let them figure it out. Now this works really, really well, and it has very powerful effects, and it helps people learn. But you can't do it when things are too complicated, or they'll never know where they are or where to go. Generally speaking, you can't do this in a whole game. Nevertheless, it's a great learning technique. So now let's talk a little bit about the creative side of the game design. It has to be based on the learning objective discovered in the analysis. It has to be structured to allow the players to practice the skills that you've identified. and it has to include the instructional strategies that you spelled out in your instructional design. And then finally, and of course everyone thinks this is most important, and it is critical for success, it has to make the game creative, challenging, and fun. So here's an example. This is our, again, our objectives for our game to teach Alaskan Native kids why they shouldn't start fires. One of the objectives that you can't read is describe the action of a fire as it spreads. So we invented a mini game called the Sparks game, where sparks flew off from a fire and you have a fire hose and you have to put the sparks out as they spread. But the trick is, as you do it, you're learning exactly how the fire spreads out. One of the other things we wanted our students to learn was how to recognize hazards in the home that could cause fires. So we did a little hazard quest game where the avatars of the children went around their home and they looked for things that were indicators of possible fire hazards. You can see in this frame that the girl is looking at a tabletop full with things that could in fact cause fires. One of the other objectives was to discourage other children from playing with fire. So we used a technique called scripting, in which you teach children a specific set of words to say when they get into a given situation. This is actually a very widely used instructional strategy. They use it to teach salesmen and medical people in difficult situations. It tells them exactly what to say when things are difficult. In this game, the avatars of the children encountered other children who wanted to start fires. They had to decide whether or not they wanted to try and talk them out of playing with fire, and if so, what would they say? And then, of course, there's always, what do you do when your house actually does catch fire? You need a family escape plan, and then how do you follow it? We designed a family escape plan game, 2 games in fact, one where you build the escape plan and one where we simulated a fire that you actually had to escape. We talked to our friend Phil Campbell, who is one of the great game designers that I know, and actually has designed a lot of the Lara Croft games. He uses a metaphor to help himself think of the game and his progress through it. So as you move from level to level, he thinks you could be moving, for example, through rooms in a very, very complex building. So just to help make his life more interesting, he designed this building complex, and even though he really didn't use it in the game, it was his metaphor for thinking about how to move through the various levels of the game. And in each one of these little sub-buildings, there's a set of activities that grows and builds to the next one. So that's the second part of our presentation on instructional design and game design. In this part of the presentation, we talked about the task analysis and how it requires a detailed list of all the steps to do the job, including those critical elements that are most important. We talked about instructional design and how it requires application of well-understood strategies, such as shaping, fading, chaining, and inductive instruction. We also talked about the creative design process, how it has to be based on the objectives and use the appropriate instructional strategies. So that's my summary of the part of the book that has to deal with instructional design and game design. We're very proud of this book. As I said, it's called End-to-End Game Development. I've written it with Terry Borst. It's now available at Amazon and Borders and bookstores everywhere. I think if you're interested in starting a serious game company or developing a serious game effort within a bigger company, or you just want to create a serious game, I think you'd enjoy reading this book. So I'm Nick Iupa for the Iupa Creative Group, and thanks very much. Bye.